Hi folks, welcome to the show. I'm Luke Hector and I'm the Broken Meeple. This is a show devoted to board games where I give reviews, top 10s, and always give my honest opinion regardless of the consequences that might befall me. We'll get on with the top 10 in just a second, but first I want to say a quick word from the sponsor of this channel. As a fellow gamer, you'll understand this is unacceptable. The solution? Head down to my new sponsor, KIENDA.co.uk. KIENDA stocks many of the hot new releases as well as some old hidden gems. Free delivery on orders over £30, further discounts on bulk purchases, and even 5% of your spending refunded back to you as points to be used for further discounts down the line. If you use the referral link in the description below and sign up for a new account, you'll get 5% discount on your first order over £60. So let's make gaps in your collection a thing of the past. Get down to KIENDA and start saving today. Thank you for listening and enjoy the rest of the video.
Get on with it.
So today I'm taking a look at top 10 house rules. Now I don't mind house rules as much as some people. There are those that will pathologically not touch the rules to any game. They'll say, no, it's perfect as it is. The designer wanted it this way. This is how it should be played.
I admire its purity.
No, this is how the designer wanted it played. Might not be the best way to play it. Everything can be improved. There is no such thing as a flawless game. So I don't like toss out house rules willy-nilly, but occasionally I will decide, you know what, I think we could just tweak one or two aspects here and it won't be too bad.
It ruins it.
Typically, that tends to happen in maybe a solo game, in which case nobody around the table needs to care that I've done a house rule. But some of these ones on the list are multiplayer games, and I don't always get my way to introduce it as a house rule, unless I'm teaching it, of course. I don't like to say to other people, like, look, I do it with a house rule, you should use it. No, that's not the way I'm talking here. But if someone else is teaching the game, I'll suggest it, and then the group can decide. But if I'm teaching it, and I want to throw it in, we're throwing it in. Deal with it. That's just the way it is. But, you know, these ones aren't huge rule tweaks. I mean, some of them are a little bigger than others, but these are just little minor things that, you know what, that they come to mind. These are the ones that I want to throw in. And I'll be interested to know in the comments what house rules you use for your games, or maybe the games I've mentioned, because there could be an extensive list of, like, a compendium of house rules that everybody's used, and I don't tend to have too many. I mean, trying to come up with 10 that I could remember for this list was a little tricky, because there may be some really obscure house rules I use elsewhere that come up so rarely that I don't actually recall them, but these 10, definitely recall them, definitely have used them in the past, and a couple are a little bit like, whatever. But, you know, certainly, you know, when we get higher up, no, these are really interesting little house rules, and I dare say that there's one or two from this list that you'll want to take for your own. So without further ado, it's time to get on with it. My number 10 is not a massive tweak for one game where it features. For the other game, it's a bit more major, and I still think that you should do this in that game because I just don't get the point otherwise. But I don't own either game, and I don't even like one of them, so it's like, whatever. That's why it's my number 10. But this one caters for Shadows over Camelot and Gloomhaven. Both of them use this rule. They're fundamentally different games, so what on earth do they have in common? They have something with involving hidden information, and it kind of makes sense in Gloomhaven, but even then I just think it's not worth the while. You know, Gloomhaven I'm not a fan of, mainly because it's a Euro game disguised as a dungeon crawl. So anything that makes me want to love it for a dungeon crawl, I don't like because it's not done well enough. And then you get the Euro side of it, which some aspects I just think, okay, now you're just turning it into a puzzle when it really shouldn't be. You know, a la Mage Knight. But with this one, the hidden information is the idea that you have cards in your hand, and in Gloomhaven's case, there are initiative values, and in Shadows of the Camelot's case, you just simply can't say what number from 1 to 5 is. And so you have to basically come up with some stupid way to sort of say to other players, oh, I can go in, let's take Shadows of a Camelot, right, somebody says, right, I could really do with a 5 at this point, you know, and you have to basically go, I can really help you at this point, and, you know what, I'm not someone you should rely on, I'm not useless, I'm just a little bit more than useless, and it's just, for God's sake, just tell me you got a 2 or 4 or 5 or something. It's stupid.
It's stupid! It's stupid!
It's this artificial way to try and introduce humor into a game. That's not how you do humor, okay? It doesn't work. In Gloomhaven, it's not meant to be humorous, but your initiative values dictate what order you can go in. And so you might play a card to want to do something, and then, you know, just by sheer dumb luck, somebody might be going before you and it screws you over. particularly with picking up loot. You know, I want to pick up this loot from the floor. Oh, you happen to go first. Oh, well, you get all the cool stuff. All right, I guess I just wasted my time playing that card then. Why can't you just simply say that I got a 25, I got a 49, I got an 84? Because technically, if you know the game well enough to have played it so that you memorized half the cards, you could technically just play Gloomhaven with a cheat sheet and get around this problem. So this is only for people who are so new to the game that they don't know these cards. I just don't get why it's a thing. So I just house rule, just tell you what the card is. I have a 5, this is a 25, get that stupidity out of the way and just move on. For my number 9, I need to grab a little party game down here. Here we go. Have not got this out in a long time, but Sheriff of Nottingham, still a really cool party game. Really still like it. However, there is one aspect to the game that really fundamentally needs a house rule change, because there is no point for the actual rule that's in there. When you are taking cards, you have the ability to take cards, and then when you discard them, you have 2 discard piles that you can decide where to go. Because it has been a while since I've played it, but basically you can kind of see what cards are there and you can draw from them and that, but you have 2 discard piles. House rule? Just have 1. Nobody cares about your stupid 2 discard pile rule. It's ridiculous. This is a game where you are lying to each other about whether you got 3 chickens in your bag or 4 loaves of bread. Do you really think I need this weird gamery mechanic where you're drawing or discarding 2 specific discard piles? It's just a weird fiddly rule. It just makes for more mess on the table. Just have a single discard pile. I don't care what someone discarded down to it. I don't care what someone drew from it. Because at the end of the day, I'm relying on whether the person is lying to me by just, you know, general bluff tactics. Then I care about trying to press my luck as to whether they drew certain cards, probably whatever. It's not like somebody's going to go, right, well, I'm going to draw 3 cards from here. They're all red. And then say, right, I got 5 chickens. It's like, they're not stupid enough to do that. So I'm not exactly gleaming much information there. And it's just one of those things. It's stupid, it's fiddly, and I just don't see the point in it. You know, just have 1 discard pile, 1 deck, nice and simple, and like I say, keep it that way. This game should not be made fiddly or complex. It's a light party game, it is great fun, it's just meant to be for laughs. Stop taking it so seriously.
Why so serious?
For my number 8, this is a house rule that I've only really just started using, like this month I've started using it. So it couldn't really go too high on the list, but this is a rule I'm going to incorporate in pretty much every game I play of this multiplayer, despite really loving the game. It's a 9 out of 10 for me and I really adore it, and that is Wayfarers of the South Tigris. I actually just played this at HandyCon recently actually. Big long 4-player game but still enjoyable. However, we didn't use this house rule then because I figured, well, people are still learning it again. I didn't want to, you know, add in extra bits. But then we got discussing it, and then I discussed it with a couple of people on Instagram, on YouTube, and that when I showed off the game photos. And I thought, yeah, maybe I should have thrown it in. The idea with Wayfarers of the South Tigris is that you have all these different card rows, and you know, you're collecting cards. They've got tags and icons on them, and you're using that to get points and progress on the journal track. All cool. There is a rule where you can look at the top 3 cards of a deck when you're drawing a new card, but it requires you to have a carrier pigeon or another provisional to do so. And I do stress that people need to use that ability more often in this game when they complain about swingy luck, okay? They're just not doing that often enough. However, that's not to say they're entirely wrong. The luck factor of the cards coming out and not being the ones that you're looking for can be a bit of a hindrance because they don't cycle unless people take cards. So you do sometimes end up with situations, even in a 4-player game, where a bunch of cards remain stagnant and there's not a lot you can do about it. Well, with this house rule, you can. Very simply. You might need to use a token for this as well, though, if you can't remember it. There is a period in the game when each of you will rest. And when you rest, you get your dice back and you do stuff. You know, it's basically an admin thing for yourself. But what I want to also do at rest time is that you flip a token or indicate that you have rested, okay? Let's say the first time you've rested, okay? And then when each person around the table has rested once, you look at all the card rows and discard the innermost card, the one that's been there for longest. All of them scrapped, gone, refresh the row. it just keeps the game cycling a little bit more, and you just reset and go again. So the next time everybody does a rest action once, you spin off that card. It keeps it moving, adds a little bit of tension, a little bit of that speed factor, because it's like, right, when's the next time somebody's resting? 3 people have rested. If you decide to rest, that card's gone. I maybe should think about buying that soon. You know, it adds that cool little bit, but it keeps the cards rolling. And now you might be thinking, well, hang on a minute, what about the meeples? Because they stay stuck on the cards. Where do they go? Just move it to the next card along. That's all it is. If they're on that card that's getting discarded, they shift to the next one. Nice and easy. It creates some little tactical points where you might think, well, those meeples are going to shift to that card. I kind of fancy it. You know what? I'll wait for that person to rest and then I'll go buy that card. It just adds another cool little decision to make in the game. It's pretty easy to include. You could even not even mention it's a house rule, frankly, because if you describe it with the rest of the game, you'd think it was built in already. But if you're having a problem with the fact that cards don't cycle enough, maybe throw this one in. My number 7 is a little bit of a boring one because I use this in a lot of different games, and frankly a lot of other people do too. It's kind of one of those universal house rules that you can chuck into any game where you think that the card draw luck is too much. The poster chart I'm using for this one though is viticulture, because viticulture, people complain about the visitor cards. They say that those visitors are too swingy and too insane. Well, if you use the advanced ones from the Tuscany expansion or one of the expansion ones, that is mitigated because they tend to have multi-choice, and I usually find that they're okay. But if you want to try and mitigate that swingy luck a little bit, then simply just do the universal house rule, draw 2, keep 1. Nice and easy. Anytime that you have to draw cards from that deck, you draw 2, choose 1. That way you just get more cards to look at, and this works in pretty much any game that requires you to draw cards from a deck. If you feel that there is just like, you know what, but there's like only so many of these and I kind of am looking for it, draw 2, choose 1, because then at least you just get to see more, and maybe you still won't find it. Whatever, card draw luck has that effect in games, but this just mitigates it to a bit. And in viticulture, it's not often you have to draw more than 1 card of a type, so it's usually fairly easy to do draw 2, keep 1 without getting too confused. If you have to draw multiple cards, then just draw 2, choose 1. Draw 2, choose 1. Or you could say, alright, just make it 1 more than the number you drew. So if I've got to draw 2 cards, I simply draw 3 cards and choose 2. Whichever way you want to do it. But this works in a lot of games, and it's one of the easiest ways to mitigate card draw luck. Viticulture definitely makes a difference though. In fact, I use this every time I'm teaching viticulture. I will put this house rule in just to stave off the inevitable complaint that some people will have over it. I mean, Stonemaier games are not known for their balance at the best of times. Oh, come on! I feel that when you throw this one into viticulture, it does a decent enough job. My number 6 is for a very old classic game, but not the rule that you might be thinking. This one is Carcassonne, and you're probably thinking, oh right, okay, it's the whole draw at the end of your turn thing. It's not. Granted, that is a house rule that I use, but frankly, who the hell doesn't use that in every game of Carcassonne? I mean, the whole idea that in all the iterations they've done, they have still, to this day, in the basic rulebook, not put in the rule, draw a tile at the end of your turn. It mitigates downtime. What is wrong with you Z-Man games? Get the point.
It's stupid! It's stupid!
But what I'm talking about though is actually a rule that gives you a little bit more decision space and a little bit more in the way of options. And some people already do this, and I'm in favour of it as well, which is to have the hand of 3 tiles. So you only draw 1 tile at the end of your turn, as normal. Again, always draw at the end of your turn. But instead of just having 1 tile in your hand that could be just useless for you, you can instead have a hand of 3, and you choose one of the 3 to do your turn with. So at least if you do have a tile that's not going to work for you at this point, you might have another tile that will. And for the most part, they're just different shapes and that. But again, it's useful to not have to rely solely on tile draw luck. This is one mainly for gamers, because if you're teaching this to brand new people, you really shouldn't overcomplicate it or give them too many options to think about on their turn. Just 1 tile will be enough. But if you're going to throw like me and some like die-hard gamers into a game of Carcassonne, I'd probably want to throw in the 3 tile rule, because it's not that hard to decide between 3 tiles, and it just adds more options, more decision space, rather than letting the game dictate whether I get a tile that's useful or not. I can't stress how much I hate in Carcassonne if I'm like, right, I could just do with anything that's got a city on it, and I draw like some stupid little singular road and that's it. Oh, great. Well, that literally does nothing for me. At least if I had 3 tiles, wouldn't necessarily have that problem. For my number 5, we are going to what has been one of my favourite games of all time. Like I said, no game is flawless. Every game can be improved in some way. And this is, of course, one of my all times, Sentinels of the Multiverse. And it's like, you're thinking, wait a minute, Luke, this used to be your number 1 and could very well still go back to number 1, who knows? But this is a 10 out of 10 game for you. How can you possibly have a house rule for this? It's actually a more gamery house rule. It's not one that I throw when I'm teaching new players this game, but if I'm teaching if I'm with experienced players, or if I'm playing this solo, I love to throw this one in. The idea in Sentinels is that you have your heroes, let's say 3 heroes, go up against the villain and there's an environment, each one with their own deck. The villain takes the turn, then the 3 heroes, and then the environment, and then rinse repeat. It goes in a cyclical
Cool Whip. Cool Whip. Cool Whip. Cool Whip.
I can't even pronounce that word, but it basically goes in a circle, okay? Villain, hero, 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 environment, and rinse repeat. The heroes have to go in a set order for the whole game, so Legacy followed by Tachyon versus by the Wraith. Why? Why can't they select the turn order? That's the house rule I throw in, particularly for a solo game. If I've got the villain, they take their turn, I have 3 heroes in front of me. Why must it go in order? Why can't I decide, you know what, this round I want Tachyon to go first, and then the Wraith, and then Legacy?
I like your plan, except it sucks, so let me do the plan, and that way it might be really good.
This leads to more tactical play, it leads to more cooperation with the players, because you can openly discuss who should go first. And sometimes you might find it doesn't make a difference, but when you've got power effects like Legacy's +1 damage, you know, you typically want that to go first in the round. But then there could be something where, you know, if the Wraith could just get off this little device ability now, then others would benefit from this. Or, you know, if it's a case of, right, there's an ongoing card there, it's really doing my head in. All right, well, hang on, if the Wraith takes the hit and gets rid of it first, then the other 2, yes, you won't necessarily have the damage boost on your turn, but at least you won't be hampered by that thing. And this just, I think, just makes for a more tactical, gamery version of Sentinels, because I just don't get why it has to go in sequence. I get maybe they just did that for simplicity's sake, but I think Xeon's End did something similar with 3 players where you could dictate what order they went into. I got problems with Xeon's End, but, you know, I still think that was a good little rule, even though it elongated the game a lot. In Sentinels, yeah, this could potentially elongate the game. But again, teach it with experienced players in that fashion, or for me, I'll just use it solo. I got 3 heroes, and you know what? I want to decide what order they go in, not the game.
Are you on my team? Just represent, pull.
All right, let's go.
For my number 4, this one is mostly for 3 and 4 players. It can work with 2, but 2 players not too bad with this in terms of its length. This is a length mitigator, because the game in question, Meadow, which sits down there, very lovely little game. It replaced Quadropolis for me. Beautiful, lovely little card tableau game. That really outstays its welcome if you're not careful with 3 or 4 players, particularly at 4. It is a grind at 4, and it's just a mess on the table. This is a table hog like crazy. And the expansion, Downstream, as much as I love the cover, is a great expansion, but man, does it do nothing to mitigate the time length, because you have these action tiles that you use to select the cards around that grid. And then in the Downstream expansion, it adds another one. So it doesn't mitigate the time length, it adds to it. That's not what you should do in a game. So what's my house rule? 2 players, you just have all the tiles, because 2 player goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and it doesn't take too long, but you could maybe put this one in for 2 player. But with 3 and 4, my house rule is you remove a tile every round. And people might think, well, this will mess up my comparison of BGG stats. I don't care, because I don't put my stats on BGG of games of 1 and net points. It's not interesting. It's not fun for me. It's not a competition. But with this, you've got to curb that time length. You've got to mitigate the Downstream expansion. And frankly, even without the Downstream expansion, I'm throwing this into the base game of Meadow with 3 or 4 players every single time I teach it. You normally have a 1, 2, 3, and 4 tile to use. I think that there's a question mark wild tile, but I think you only get that in 2 players. I could be wrong. It's been a while since I've played it at 2. But with the expansion, you then get the 1, 2, 3, 4, and that river tile. I say each round, one of those tiles you can't use. You get to pick which one you don't use. It's not random, it's not swingy luck, but let's say you've got the 1, 2, 3, 4 and the river tile. One round you might say, I don't want to take anything from the river section. Okay, fine. You might say, well, you know, I'm going to use the 3, now I need the 1. I could really use that river. And then you got to decide, oh, hang on, am I using the 2 or the 4? Ah, okay. Got to make a decision here. It's another decision to make, but it cuts the length. One less action around. It makes a difference, particularly in 3 and 4 players. I don't care if it makes the points a little bit weird. It was not noticeable to anybody playing it, but when you sit down with the downstream expansion, you play a 4-player game of this and it takes nigh on 2 hours, you want to kill everybody.
That escalated quickly.
You do. It hurts. It's not something I want to repeat ever again. So I will always throw this in, and certainly it means that I don't want to play anybody else's copy of Meadow with 3 or 4 players unless they're going to put some mitigation in, because it really does take too long at those player counts. Remove a tile every round. For my number 3, we're talking about a nice little card game. Very cute little card game, which surprised me actually. I didn't think for a game that cost me £6 on Amazon to get like a German version, even though it's multilingual, you know, that people were suggesting to me I should play after I think I did my top 10 tiny games list. Or maybe it was before that, I don't know. You surprised me how much I liked Ohanami. Now, Ohanami is a really cool little filler game. You're trying to collect cards and you place them in 3 columns, but you can't go in between the numbers. So if I put a 55 down and then I put a 60 down, I can't put a 56, 7, whatever. You know, I can't go in between that bit. And you're trying to collect the different types of colored cards, and it scores you points in different ways throughout the game. It's a really clever little game, tight scoring that you wouldn't expect. Honestly, give it a shot. But there is one rule that you must ignore. In fact, I think everybody ignores this rule. I would be curious to know if there's anybody out there who plays with this rule because it is just dumb. When you draft the cards, you draft the cards each time. There is a rule in this where the turn order for when you place down a card is dictated, I believe, it's been so long since I played it, but it's essentially based on who chose the cards first or who played a card first. I mean, that's essentially it. It's this weird thing that you're supposed to keep an eye on as to which player around the table did something first, and then the turn order is done from then.
Well, that was pointless.
It makes subtle difference, frankly. I don't care what the turn order is. I'm not going to base my decision as to whether I keep a card or not on whether you played a particular number, because there's 120 odd numbers in the deck, and we're not going to use most of it. So what difference does it make that you've done that? Just ignore that rule. In the house rule I use is that it's simultaneous. You just do it simultaneous. It is so much simpler if you do it that way. You draft the 2 cards. You then go, right, ready, flip, and then you do what you're going to do. If you're going to bin it, you simply don't flip it. You know, simultaneous, nice and quick. The game goes at a much quicker pace. That whole fiddliness is gone. I honestly cannot fathom why you would prefer to do it with the rules as written than these simultaneous rules. And if you are one of these people who disagrees with me on this, please put a comment in and tell me why, because at the moment I can't fathom why. You need to tell me. It's just such a weird rule. Simultaneous, quick flip, nice little drafting game. It's a filler. It's not meant to be stupid strategic or anything. You're kind of semi-pressing your luck whilst also trying to hate draft the other player because you know, oh, he doesn't like these particular numbers. They're not my favorites, but I can work with them. I'll take these 2 and leave you with a couple of hundreds that you hate. Haha. You know, that's the sort of game it is. Why they thought this whole turn order thing would work? I mean, why couldn't they have just fought simultaneous? I wanted to be the fly on the wall in that game design room that made them think that was a good thing. I don't know, I could rant on for ages. As I say, ignore that rule. Simultaneous card flip, Ohanami works wonders.
It's stupid! It's stupid!
My number 2 is, I wouldn't say it's a cheat, but this one has kind of been fixed with the upgrade settings for this game and what's coming out in 2.0 of this game. But for ages I was using this house rule, and so were a lot of people, and the fact that people complained about this enough in the game, despite as much as I enjoy it, meant that they had to come up with a better way of doing it in 2.0 of Tainted Grail. Tainted Grail is probably my go-to campaign game. As much as I rave about this war of mine and that 3-act campaign, that's probably the best campaign when you consider the length factor. But if we're going to talk about one of these long drawn out campaigns that takes multiple games, multiple chapters and everything, Tainted Grail is the one that I have downstairs and put my stop behind, because the setting and the writing and the gameplay are just mwah for me. You know, it just works. And others have come along and tried, like ISS Vanguard and that, and Oathsworn, and they're decent games. But I can only play so many campaign games, and Tainted Grail works for me. I've even played the 2.0 version on a preview video I did last year. Check out that video, and I'm looking forward to see, you know, more of that setting, and possibly even see how the 2.0 rules influence the old rules, because you can get basically an upgrade kit. But the problem was these menhirs. Awakened Realms does not really understand the concept of grinding in their games. As much as I like their games, they really need to understand that padding out the content by ways of grinding is annoying. We don't like it in video games, we sure as hell don't like it in board games. Get a clue.
Hello? Hello, anybody home?
So basically there were these menhirs, and the menhirs were how you traveled across the map. You had to activate them with resources, and it got intensive at times. These were a grinding pain because you constantly had to keep them on a timer, which meant that they whittled down, then you had to get them back up, and then they whittled down, you had to keep getting them back up. And if you just got unlucky with a particular, you know, excursion you were doing, you just basically were at the mercy of these things. And you could waste hours of the game just trying to grind for the stuff you need to activate the things. They are a pain. 2.0 does it a lot better, and I'm glad to say they have. But in the original, you basically, I say you had to have 3 max, and they were indefinite. No timer at all. The timer is gone. Once you've lit it, it will stay there until you manually get rid of it. And by manually get rid of it, I mean that you can only have 3 menhirs up at a time. So they will never go away. But as soon as you decide you want another one lit, you've already got 3, you've got to decide which one goes poof and goes out of the way for a bit. This enables you to get across the map as normal, but it also means that if you just want to hang out in a small area and have fun with the journal exploration, or do a little bit of resource gathering and stuff, you haven't got to think, oh god, the thing's ticking down, what am I going to do? And then 2 hours later you've had to grind more resources that you've just spent the time collecting for something else. It's a pain. I'm glad they fixed this for 2.0. I mean, it's not entirely fixed, but it's done better, and it's done better, and there is a way to get around it, and a sort of immediate other cost you can pay to get them up if need be. So definitely 2.0 Tainted Grail is an improvement, but man, did I have to house rule this constantly in my solo games, because it just got ridiculous.
Found anything yet? We ain't found shit.
And finally, the universal house rule that I will now throw into as many games as I can, because this rule is just such a clever design choice that I'm surprised no one came up with it before. This is, now the poster child I'm using is Wingspan. I love Wingspan, but this house rule worked perfectly for it. But it's not so much a house rule that I've come up with. I wish I could take credit. No, I have to give credit to one of my other favorites, Art Nova, because Art Nova came up with this idea, and I think it's so good that if I have a chance to throw it into a game, I will. That's why it's my number 1. This is a house rule that basically is so good it needs to be in more games. And this is the objective discard rule. In Arc Nova, you are given 2 objectives at the start of the game, but I hate it when you get given 2 objectives and you have to pick one, because it's the start of the game, nothing's happened. How the hell do I know what's going to happen? I've got no idea what's going to happen, alright? You know, will I draw these cards? Will I get reds this game? Will I have to find animals with a title with a colour in the name? I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. And you might think, well, okay, it gives you something to aim for. But then if what you aim for doesn't come out of the decks, you're screwed. Arc Nova has this really clever thing that when you get to a certain point on the track, the points track, which typically doesn't happen till at least halfway through the game, if not later, you at that point discard one of the objectives you started with. So you've got half a game to decide whether one of these objectives is better for you or not. I've got to collect water icons, or I've got to get what's another good example? Or I've got to build my entire zoo. Alright, fine. As I get to that point, I'm realizing that I'm not doing too well on the water icons, but I have flipped my build card and I could try and finish my map. You know what? Boom. We'll bin that and I'll stick with this. That just works wonders. Why is Wingspan the poster child? Because the bonus cards. The bonus cards are woefully underpowered in Wingspan. I know people talk about the eggs being more powerful, but the Oceania expansion kind of fixes that with the board. But the bonus cards are still a bit of a hit and miss affair, because you might start off with one that is fantastic for you, or you might just start off with one that whiffs entirely and they're not worth that many points unless you really do well with it. And then again, you have to get 2 of them at the start and decide which one to bin. How the hell do I know what I'm supposed to bin? Here's the house rule incorporated in the Wingspan though. It's 4 rounds long. When you get to the end, well, first off, when you start the game, you are dealt 2 bonus cards. Keep both of them, right? Keep both. And then at the end of round 2, specifically round 2, which is the halfway point from round's perspective, discard a bonus card. Doesn't even have to be one of the ones you started with, because there are birds that you can play which let you draw more bonus cards. You just discard 1. This does wonders to bring the bonus cards back to a power level where they are things that you should actually start thinking about, and they're not just throwaway points. Because you might start off with 2 cards, and then as you get more birds, you realize you're actually doing well with both of them. But you played a bird that let you drew another bonus card, and you're like, that didn't exactly work out for me. You know what? I'll discard that one and keep the original 2. But even if you don't play any of those birds, you don't get any more bonus cards, just being able to wait until halfway through the game after you've got some birds, seen what's going on, what other people have got, before you decide, do I want to check out this one that wants me to get loads of baskets with eggs in them, or this one that requires me to get birds that have all got people's names in the title? Well, I found quite a lot of Tom, Dick and Harry birds during the game, so I'll get rid of that one and keep this one. My God, does it work wonders here, and I don't just want to do it in my games of Wingspan. I will actively take measures to try and convince the person teaching Wingspan that it should be in the game. That's how much I think this rule works. And I say Wingspan, but honestly, any game that says draw 2 or multiple objectives at the start of the game and pick one, where you have no idea what you're choosing, if there is a way that I can think of to incorporate the Arc Nova rule in those games, I will do it. Hence, this is my number 1. This needs to be in more designs of games. I'm staggered that it's not been thought of before. I'm staggered that since I've not seen this used, but I'm certainly going to throw it in, and I hope a lot of you do as well. So there we go, top 10 house rules, and maybe I've played others or not even realised they were house rules, but these 10 came to mind and I had to talk about them. Like, these were definitely ones that I use or want to use. Maybe there's another house rule there that I've used as well, but if it's not that important or I can't remember it, then it clearly wasn't a top 10 wordy one. But I do have some other ones on my honourable mentions. So first off, Hive Mind. Hive Mind, great little party game. You've got to answer questions like, things you would keep in, name 4 things you keep in your pocket or something, and then people write down the answers and you're trying to come up with answers that everybody else has also come up with. Great party game, love it. But the amount of times that, the amount of people that go down the slots, because you're trying to stay in the hive, not get kicked out, the amount of people that do that is only 1 for most of the while until you get to this point round the board where it starts being 2 or 3. You roll the die at the start of the turn and you move the queen bee along, and eventually it gets to that loop and starts going round. Well, house rule, start at the loop, because it takes multiple turns to get to that loop, and all that while only 1 person is going down the level. It just elongates the game too much. Just start at the loop and make things a bit more chaotic. It's just more fun and it curbs the time length down that way. But like I say, it's purely for Hive Mind. King of Tokyo, I hate the idea that you've got to start in Tokyo when you roll a claw, because people are hesitant to roll claws. And King of Tokyo is not a game where you should be hesitant to roll claws. I should be loving the fact that I roll claws because I get to damage people. But the first person to go into Tokyo usually gets digged on by a lot of other people by the time they go in there. And so can't we just randomize who's in Tokyo from the get-go? Like maybe roll all the dice and whoever gets the most claws starts in Tokyo. It just makes for a weird first turn, but it goes away pretty quickly, so it's not a big deal. But I just feel that maybe it could have been changed somewhat. Oh, Mandala Stones. Oh my God, you remember that abstract game from Board and Dice? I cannot believe somebody came up with this dumb rule in the rule book. But the idea is that when you put this pillar down, you take these stones around the edge of the pillar and you use it and you put it in stacks on your board. The rule book makes this stupid elongated way of saying that you've got to pick them up in a particular clockwise direction and then flip it over or invert. Yeah, you got to do all this fiddly stuff with it. And it's like, yeah, but you tell me to go clockwise and then flip it and all this lot. Going anti-clockwise would achieve the exact same effect and I don't have to do any weird flippery nonsense. It's just, who cares? Or just take it at random, because for the most part it is random. It goes into detail about how to do this rule, and it's so dumb that nobody uses it. House rule, just do it randomly, or go anti-clockwise, whatever. It just makes more sense. Oy, oy, oy. Let's see, Stroganoff, don't replenish the furs that you get from the market. Don't replenish them until the end of a turn. Normally you replenish as you go for your turn, but all this does is that as soon as another one comes out, the person has to reevaluate their options, and then you get AP, and it elongates the turn. Just don't replenish the fur market until they're done with their turn, and then you don't get that problem. Let's see, and finally, Planted. Planted, I actually finally got to play Planted, actually. When did I, was it in April? Yeah, it was in April. Damn, I should have put that on my April, was that in April? I felt like it was. Maybe it was in March. I can't remember. But basically, I did get to play it recently, and I think the game is fine. It does the job, and it's nice and simple, but I do not think that you need to rush out and get a copy because it's like so hard to find outside of the US target market. It's a fine game. But in 2 players, the display of cards that you choose from does not cycle anywhere near quick enough. So a little house rule is that at the end of every round, 2 of them scrap. You scrap a couple of cards every round, because otherwise in 2-player that market just gets really stagnant, and that's not good in any game that has card tableaus. 3 and 4-player, they cycle a bit more often. You just need to throw that little bit extra in to make the 2-player game a little bit more, shall we say, fluid rather than static, if that makes sense. So that's it for me on this episode of the Broken Meeple. If you like what you see, please thumb it up on YouTube and share the video out on social media if you can. Let's get some discussion topics going on Facebook and that. But also, let me know in the comments what your house rules are. What house rules do you use in games often, and which ones have really fixed problems with the game? Do you agree with the house rules I've come up with? Do you have alternate versions? Are you one of these people that plays on Hanami by the base rules? Seriously? Why? But still, get your comment down below and let me know why if you are one of them. And, you know, this could be an interesting little compendium of house rules on this video. I think it's quite an interesting little topic, because it's not like, people will think like, oh, you know, you're using a house rule. Is that disrespecting the designer? No! The designer still did a lot of great stuff for something like Wingspan, or, you know, or other games that I've mentioned. It's not like I'm saying your design sucks. I'm just saying that I think your design is great because I love your game, but maybe just this one little tweak, it's just a tiny little bit of constructive criticism that maybe if we were debating it, they would probably still go, nah, I still kind of like it the way it is. Well, that's cool. I'm just going to tweak it when I play it. Whoopee. I still love the game. I still recommend the game to other people. None of these house rules I think are deal breakers. Well, maybe Hanami, but let's face it, that's not a massive deal. It's not a massive game changer. But for example, if we wanted to play Wayfarers of the South Tigris and nobody wanted to use that discard cycling rule, big whoop. If somebody wants to play Sentinels and they say, nah, can we just go in an order? Whatever, big whoop. It's not a big deal. Even in Shadows of a Camelot, if people want to do the whole humorous thing about not saying what they got in their hand, fine, it doesn't kill the experience for me. I just think these little tweaks make it better. But that's a personal thing. It's always subjective when it comes to house rules. It's just the nature of the beast. But anyway, I'm waffling on, so take care and be sure to check out more content on the channel, including the 2 new series that I've done for Best of the Month and the new Keep or Cull series I'm doing. I mean, you've asked me to do some of that stuff and now it's there for you, so hopefully you'll enjoy it. The views are certainly saying so thank you very much for that. Until next time, remember, regardless of whether you're a fan of house rules or not, it's still only a game, so take care and enjoy, and bye for now.